If you've been living under a rock, then you haven't realized that Nami has been taking over the OP07 metagame at GenCon this past weekend, with many Nami players going to this event to take on the gauntlet and bring it back home for the mill archetype. Many have actually succeeded at placing and doing well with a first place finish, the first big win for Nami at a big event, as well as a second place finish. And both of those lists I wanted to go over today. We're going to go over the list and break down not only the similarities that we see in terms of the list that you're probably playing, but also some of the differences, some of the like, I guess, flex slots, if we want to call it that, for cards that I didn't realize were maybe as replaceable as they were before. Some of the numbers that we see from other big Nami players really changing up what we would consider dead cards and 2K counters and replacing them with more Nami playables that we're used to from previous metas. And we're going to discuss it all here today. So if you like what you're seeing in the video so far, leave a like on it. And if you wanted more Nami content and gameplay breakdown analysis just like this, then you got to subscribe to the channel and turn that bell notification on. So let's hop right into it and go into the first place deck list from GenCon. I'm going to interrupt real quick here before we head into the actual analysis. If any of y'all can get me in touch with David and with Rohit, that'd be great. I would love to do an interview with them. David, I found their Twitter and I was able to kind of shoot them a message here. So I'm going to try and get in touch with them on their second place finish and get their thoughts and dig their brain here. But Rohit especially, I don't believe they have a Twitter, or I don't have their socials contact. So if someone can get me in touch with them, I'd love to do an interview with them if they're willing. Otherwise, we're just gonna have to stick to this analysis. So let me know in the comment section down below. Y'all know where I am on Discord. Hit me a message, try and get me in touch, and let's get that information flowing. Orange Samurai D reports here that at GenCon Indianapolis on August 1st, 400 plus players, Rohit Pusarla with Blue Nami Mill wins it first place with the Kuja Pirates package largely. So in terms of some of the minute numbers, we have still 3 Gloriosa, not 2 and 3 seems to be kind of the tipping point here. 3 Apis. Usually what happens if you're kind of more so preparing for the Nami mirror, you'd play like 4 Apis, 3 Gloriosa, or 2 Gloriosa, 4 Margaret, 4 Snake Dance. But the big zinger here is that there's no 2K Sandersonia, there's no Perfume Femur either. There's 2 Deathwink and 2 Mr. 1. So instead of maybe the 1 of Deathwink or the 1 of Zeph, along with 3 2K Sandersonias or 3 2K Perfume Femurs, then we have the Deathwink and the Mr. 1. And I think, like, honestly, I think this is pretty fair. Like, if you're playing Deathwink, you kind of need the Mr. 1. The idea here is that you want to reduce your hand size with the Gum Gum Gavel to further enable the Deathwink. And when you're playing 2 Deathwinks, that just pretty much means that 9 times out of 10 you're going to see at least 1 that you passively might mill 1 over with like Gum Gum Gavel and Usopp's Rubber Band, and you might be forced to mill 1 over with something like a Kaya early on or pitch 1 to a Gavel, but chances are later in the game that you might be able to set yourself up to play one of those Deathwinks. You want to have the recursion with the Mr. 1. So I think this list is, again, relatively pretty succinct. There's a lot of the similarities here. We're not doing anything spicy like dropping Impel Down All-Stars. We're still playing 4 White Snakes, 4 Love Mellows, obviously searchable by the Gloriosa. So relatively speaking, the Perfume Femur package these days seems to be the 3 to 4 Apis plus the 3 to 4 or 3 to 2 Gloriosa, Margaret, Snake Dance, Love Mellow. But instead of playing the additional 3 copies of something that is searchable, they're opting for something like Deathwink and Mr. 1. Now, that is the first place list. And honestly, I rate it. I understand why. Like, generally the package is there. They're not doing anything, I guess, like too crazy. I think it's kind of interesting that they're able to actually have enough targets with something like 3 times Gloriosa. But I think in a lot of ways, like, bottom decking things can also be pretty valuable if you do miss pushing Kaya's back up to the top that may have been bottom decked. Like, there's a lot more bottom decking in this metagame that us Nami players are having to contend with versus previous metagames where there's a lot more KO. Now, when it comes to the next list, this is from David Melee here, second place in the Hannover Regional with over 1,000 players with Nami. So they did really well here. They kind of dropped their whole kind of matchups here. Actually, I should go over before I go into this. I believe Orange Samurai was able to kind of give us some of their matchups here. So the matchups were 2 Bonnie, 2 Black White Luffy, 2 RP Law, 1 Ella, NL, 1 Boa. Like, this is, It's actually kind of insane that they played 2 Bonnie, 2 RP Law, and got here. And the reason I mentioned 2 Bonnie is because that's a matchup where you hope to dodge the big 9-cost Zoro, and RP Law obviously just being our worst matchup in the metagame right now. It's kind of crazy to me that like this was able to happen. And I mean, I think I've been hearing a lot here about how the RP Law matchup was apparently starving the Nami player, where, and I have to get a clarification on this as well, where the RP Law player was just kind of playing out characters and not swinging, which is honestly in that specific matchup the exact incorrect thing to do. It's not like the NL matchup where you can starve and then play like 9-cost Yamato, 10-cost Rush Ace, and then just wait till you have like a massive board and swing. The RP Law matchup can't really do that, right? It can't really do that. It has a bunch of lower cost stuff. You have to spend a lot of Dawn to buff up those characters and start swinging in, and by that point you're going to allow me to sculpt the hand that I need to build up the white snakes I need to stop your 9k counter. So I have the white snake bring me to 6, and then all of a sudden my 4k counters can take me up to 10, stopping your 9k swing. So a lot of Dawn investment and a lot of time wasted allowing me to sculpt my hand and just kind of forcing you to honestly do nothing. So don't starve Nami players and as an RP Law player. That's not the winning strategy. And for Bonnie, a lot of times, again, it's just looking for the 9-cost Zoro. Not really a searchable card, but one that you can dodge. Black White Luffy, positive matchup in my opinion. NL still a positive matchup if you can draw it right, even if they starve you. And Boa can be as well. Boa doesn't really cheat things out like Dofi does, so they tend to not get on board as fast. So you really are out here to dodge pudding. So if they do starve you, then the pudding can actually be a really good play. So Boa players can really get you, but I find that not a lot of Boa players like know what they're doing when it comes to the Nami matchup, or at least the ones that I've come across. So starving you, playing pudding, and then punishing you with cards like the kind of 4-cost 4k power Law can also be really powerful as well, cheating things out with like Jinbei and whatnot. And there's a lot of bounce effects, so they could like play out the Law, bounce it, play Jinbei, play it again. Like there's so many ways that they can like incrementally punish you in that matchup. So I think a good spread. Really big shout out to Rohit for getting there. I just again surprised that they beat 2 Bonnies and 2 RP Laws. But up against David's here, second place finish at Hannover with over 1,000 players. What is this? 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 15 rounds, 15 games of Nami. My mind would melt after like after like Purple Luffy, like halfway through. Absolutely insane that they played this many games. So it looks like they, generally speaking, lost to RP Law. They lost to 1 Moria here. I don't think they played Moria otherwise, but I mean, they beat RP Law here. They beat a bunch of Lucci's, a couple of Purple Luffy as well. Lucci seems like, honestly, just even with 6-cost Brook, Lucci seems like a really favorable matchup because you can pick the cards that go back into your deck with something like 6-cost Brook. So it doesn't even feel like the deck really has an answer to you. So they also beat the Nami Mirror, which is absolutely hilarious. And we're going to touch on that in a second here. And then in the finals, unfortunately, Purple Luffy, they were not able to overcome, but that's fine. Purple Luffy, largely speaking, not a great matchup for Nami. Not really a matchup that you can quote unquote like really prepare for. Really an underdog type of archetype. Now I'm wondering if this is Black White Luffy. Oh no, it is Black White Luffy. Sorry, I'm thinking about Purple Luffy. Sorry, I thought Luffy and then I completely ignored this. No, Black White Luffy. Specifically in that matchup, there's really like 2 ways that deck can really get over top of you, and that is either, you know, they're not able to manipulate their life and they go like Moria, and they kind of set themselves up that way through like various discard options and just getting rid of cards, or they can get the life manipulation that they need and they just throw a bunch of rush NLs at you. That's really the tough part. Otherwise, unless they have the nuts, generally speaking, you should be able to keep up, right? 9k counters are big. White Snake is low-key really good in the mid to late game, but not good early. In the early game, you want your 9k counters. You want your 7k counters as well, because they do have a lot of 6k swings. But later in the game, White Snakes are actually really good because they're going to start swinging 9s, and it's better to give yourself that permanent 1k boost to tax their future 9s that come at you in combat. So Black White Luffy still can be relatively tough. They did end up getting that first match, but maybe like the Luffy player like clued in and changed up their strategy. But regardless, a matchup that's very losable, but still relatively positive for you. But this is the list itself. So four of the Margarets still. You have 1 Perfume Femur, 4 Snake Dance, 4 of the Mellow. Pretty standard there. But 4 Apis, which can help in the Nami mirror, 3 Margaret, and then what they opted for here is it's not like a one of Deathwing, one of Zeph situation. It's a hanger, East Blue type, Mr. One, Perfume Femur. A lot of interesting decisions here. I actually really like this option if you're expecting the Nami mirror, and it did help in this case. They did face one Nami player. Shout out to that Nami player. They probably placed top 64 here, or no, this is the top 32 cut. So this Nami player placed top 32 as well. So shout out to them for unfortunately not being able to kind of come out there, but having David come out there. Mr. One for a little bit of recursion, and the Perfume Femur for the trigger, as well as an extra searchable for the 3 times Gloriosa. There's a lot more searching that you're going to be doing with that. Now, there's a lot of cool options here. The Dawn here is like really killing my OCD here. The fact that you have one of this, I believe this is the Nami Dawn, and then you have like the Gold Dawn here. This is hurting my soul. Why are you playing a one of here? Just keep it consistent. You're killing me here. But regardless, great placement with the Nami decks. But let's break down the list themselves here. So I have the sim available to me here. This is Rohit's first place deck. So let's talk about some of this. So we have the 2 Deathwings, right? And we have the 2 Mr. Ones. So the idea, again, as I was mentioning, is that you want to use the Mr. One to recur Gavel. That is your number 1 target in this deck, especially with enabling something like Deathwing. You want to make sure that you're empty-handed as much as possible, and Apis does help with that. Apis gets you empty-handed, gets rid of your Impel Downs, gets rid of cards that are too high cost, because a lot of times what you'll find is if you play enough Nami these days, a lot of your events now cost a lot. It's a very costly deck now, because if you play a Margaret, that's 3 Dawn. It's not 3 Dawn to draw 2 cards, it's 3 Dawn to draw 1 and play a blocker that can potentially get KO'd, that can potentially get bottom decked. And then you have something like a White Snake and the Snake Dance and the Love Mellow that each cost 2 Dawn. 2 Dawn is a lot of investment. So a lot of times what happens is you may end up hitting the Gum Gavel, dropping White Snake, dropping Snake Dance, dropping Mellow, just so you have enough Dawn to maybe play out like a Spada, play out like a Rubber Band, and then have enough Dawn for the draw 2 on the Deathwing. In a list like this, you really want to make sure as much as possible that the Deathwing is drawing 2. In those small cases, if you can draw 1, fine, it's serviceable. But if Deathwing is drawing 0, you're probably in a really bad spot. You probably can't afford to take the life, or you really don't want to take that last hit for whatever reason. Like, Deathwing should always be drawing at least 1, and a lot of the majority of the time you should be enabling it hard to draw 2 or get rid of it. Draw 2 or get rid of it. Like, it's not worth it. It's 3 Dawn. It's a lot just for a 6k counter. If you're using it to save yourself, sure, but that should not be your primary motive here. So the Impel Down package is kind of what this is part of. And obviously the decks now have dropped Buggy. We are playing Gloriosa as our searcher. And Buggy allowed us to grab cards like the Airbrick Brickfist to bounce our Kayas and everything, but now our bounce happens on our opponent turn. So we've got more efficient now with Snake Dance, giving us a 4k counter, but also being able to bounce our characters on our opponent's turn, saving us that time on our turn, giving our opponent less information, forcing us to use less resources on our turn with something like a Brickfist. That really is a dead card. It doesn't counter out or do anything, but Brickfist has that variability of being able to bounce your opponent's stuff. But nowadays, it's really the 5 and 6 drops that prove a lot more problematic for the Nami player. So it's better to be able to bounce 5 and 6, which is why we see something like Gravity Blade being so dang powerful these days for the blue decks. It's seeing a playset, or at least a 3 of in Dofi, in Emporio, in Boa, whatever it might be. The blue decks are playing a lot of the kind of Gravity Blade here. But we're also not playing something like Gum Ring. If we were playing 4 Deathwing in this current metagame, I would honestly, if you're playing the Impel Down package, I would probably be playing the Buggy Searcher, but I'll also be playing some amount of Gum Rains, because I don't think Apis is enough, right? Like, you could play Apis, but it's a little bit more proactive. It forces you to take out more cards than you need to, but in this deck, you tend to draw a little bit better. But if you're playing Impel Down, you tend to be more down on resources. So if you're going more into that package, if you wanted to play more Mr. Ones, more Deathwings, I'd probably be playing Gum Rain also as a free draw option. But I think this list is pretty succinct. I think if you're playing more Deathwings, you should be playing more Mr. Ones to grab back your discard package to drop cards in your hand. Deathwing is also a sweet trigger, just being able to bounce 7 cost or less back to hand. There are a fair amount of 6 drops and 5 drops that you do want to be bouncing. A little bit more limited in terms of the 7 drops that you want to be bouncing. I think 8 is that threshold. There are some like green 8 drops and black 8 drops that you that you tend to want to bounce. There's also like 1 or 2 like purple 8-drops off the top of my head. There's that one that like has double attack that you do want to bounce a lot of the time. So Deathwing just as a bounceable trigger, and then Mr. One just as a 1k counter can also be pretty valuable there as well. So regardless, Rohit, pretty happy with this list. Not too much to kind of speak on here. I think the list is pretty succinct, and I'd be pretty happy with playing this. So if you want to see more gameplay of me playing this list, maybe through ranked or just kind of regular testing, let me know in the comment section down below. I definitely will be regardless, but it depends on how much y'all want to see. The next up, the list that I want to see here is if we kind of scroll down to David's list here. Now the numbers kind of switch a little bit. So again, we are playing a full play set of Apis. We are playing 3 Gloriosa, so a little bit more prepared for the Nami mirror. I would say that's kind of like the big decision you would make here. And the 3 cards that you're playing are 1 Mr. One. That's probably going to be recursion for the Rubber Band and the Gum Gum Gavel. And the reason I'm mentioning the Rubber Band now is that you're not trying to enable like a Deathwing. So there is value in returning the Rubber Band. If you didn't have extra cards to get rid of for something like a Gum Gum Gavel, then maybe you don't want to return that. But obviously, optimally, it's the Gavel to return with the Mr. One. But again, it's another East Blue target at the end of the day, or sorry, not an East Blue target. It's an Impel Down target that we're not able to grab with the buggy that we're not playing, but it's a 1k counter, I should say. So Mr. One grabbing the Rubber Band, grabbing this Gavel, but also in situations being able to grab Spada to purposefully force a bottom deck, right? So grabbing the top 3, bottom decking things, pushing Kaya's and the peel-offs that you might put back with like 6-cross Brook, like forcing these cards back up to the top. And also if you see hits that you really want, like maybe you Gloriosa and you go to grab a Love Mellow, but then you see like a peel-off, you see like a Kaya in there, you bottom deck those, getting Mr. One to grab back a Spada to bottom deck those, really powerful. And then also with something like Snake Dance, you don't really need that many Mr. Ones. If you have one out, a lot of times what will happen is if you play a Mr. One, you play a Kaya, people will be focused on the Kaya to bottom deck the Kaya, bottom deck the blocker, destroy the blocker, whatever it might be. They will leave the Mr. One alone a lot of times. So sometimes you can get 2, maybe even 3 recursions of the Mr. One with something like Snake Dance to be able to bounce it to your hand. So something like that can be pretty powerful. And then the one of Perfume Fever, we already know what this card does, especially with OP07 really coming into its own with Nami and the list that we want to play. We were playing 3 Perfume Beamers initially. That was kind of the big craze. We kind of moved into the 2K standard Sonia, and now it's kind of like a choice between the 2. Perfume Femur, there's no front effect, otherwise you can just play it out, but you have the draw 1 trigger, and it's searchable off of the Gloriosa. So if you needed a Gloriosa, it's another hit that you can pitch to the Apis to further enable yourself to find yourself a Kaya or something like a Sanji's Peel-Off. Or the new East Blue type in this list is Mr. Hanger. So 2 costs, so many of you may not be familiar with this. So 2 costs, 0 power, 1k counter. So great, it's not exactly dead in your hand. Activate main, you may trash 1 card from your hand and rest this character, draw 1 card. So Mr. Hanger here, East Blue type, searchable with Apis, by the way. So the additional hit with this is really powerful. Your East Blue targets, generally speaking, are Apis can search for itself, but it can hit Kaya, it can hit Peel-Off, Gum Gum Gavel, and Rubber Band here. I don't believe there's one more target in here. Yeah, I don't. It should just be that. So Hanger acts as that additional target for it as well, and you can trash 1 card from your hand and then draw 1 card. So initially when you play this, you can activate this the turn you play this. You play this for 2, trash 1 card from your hand, maybe it's an Impel Down, and then you draw 1 card. This is extremely, like, this is insane in the Nami mirror because you're not bottom decking cards, right? So the card that I most think about here that I think not a lot of people may remember is Logue Town. So I actually want to get back to testing a card like this. So 2 cost, activate main, you may place this card and 1 card from your hand at the bottom of your deck in any order, draw 2 cards. The trigger is you play 1 card, play this card, and it's an East Blue type, so it's searchable off the Apis. And what this does is it sets yourself up in the slower matchups. What you do is you take away dead cards, you set yourself up so you put your Kayas and your Peel-Offs at the bottom. That way you draw fresh cards, which are counters, so that you can set yourself up for like a big main phase, like play out a bunch of Kais, play out a bunch of Peel-Offs, but then early on, you then just kind of set yourself continuously with like your Deathwings, your Gum Gum Gavels, your Snake Dances, whatever. So you continue to set yourself up that way. But Hanger discards the cards, it trashes it completely, and usually what happens is you get like 1 activation out of this, because especially in the current metagame, it's really easy to get rid of a card like Mr. Hanger or bottom deck a card like Mr. Hanger. The RP law kind of condition easily meets something like this. It is already at 0 power, and something like Lucci can kill this like pretty quick. But a lot of times in the mirror or in slower matchups where they don't have removal, getting like 2 cards can be really powerful. Initially, this is card disadvantage. You play this card and then you trash the card from your hand and then you draw 1 card. So that's 2 cards. So you play this out, you trash a card for the price of 1. But then the turn after that, then you're going kind of 1 for 1. Then you're kind of filtering away cards like the Perfume Femur, maybe an Impel Down. Maybe you don't need something like a Margaret because you don't have the Dawn for it. It's too early. You trash that, draw yourself into maybe like a Spada, a Mellow, a Snake Dance, whatever it might be. And the Snake Dance can maybe bounce the Hanger so you can do it over and over and over again. So Hanger can be really powerful, and especially in the Nami mirror, being able to search for this off of the Apis. And then a lot of times what happens is the Nami player can't swing into this for 2 reasons. You don't generally want to be swinging into characters, because then what happens is not forget the gavel. The gavel can't protect characters, it can only protect leader. You then don't want to swing in as the Nami player, because then you yourself are going to hanger and you're going to set yourself up with Snake Dances. You're going to set yourself up with Mellows. You're going to set yourself up with other options that just draw you cards, and you're going to overpay on that. A lot of times what happens is the Nami player, if they have to get rid of hanger, which they kind of feel like they do, they swing into that, and then all of a sudden you overplay. You go Snake Dance, bounce this, Snake Dance, bounce this, Snake Dance, bounce this, and that's it. That's 6 done. I have overpaid, I protected my hanger, but then now I bounce like 3 characters and I've countered out. Absolutely insane value. So it kind of just has like pseudo unattackable. Like it's like you can't even attack this, because not only do you not want to enable cards that are in your hand as the Nami opponent, but as that Nami player, now you just kind of have to contend with this, giving free value, trashing cards that are unneeded, continuously drawing through the deck. It's like you're getting 2 free draws every single turn. You get your draw per turn and you get the draw off the hanger. Insane mirror breaker type of card. I'm really surprised that they're actually playing this. I think like 4 Apis is more than enough. But hey, if you ever needed to beat Nami, if you just feel like you got a lot of Namis, this is kind of the list for it. Truthfully, this is the list for it. This is absolutely insane in terms of the options that you have to get rid of things. I will say though, if you were contending with Nami, you'd make more decisions. Like you play the hangers, but you probably play like a one of Zeph as well. Zeph kind of makes the Nami mirror really interesting. A lot of times what the Nami mirror now is pretty much solitaire. You're tapping out a bunch, you're playing out a bunch of cards. A lot of times what can happen is you can play Zeph, and that kind of forces your opponent to not be able to do that. They have to have the Margaret. They cannot tap out because they need to make sure that they can counter out of the Zeph swing, or you're milling 7, which is a lot more powerful than the amount of cards that they can mill. So Zeph can make that kind of really interesting and force your opponent to not tap out, tax the amount of actions that they can take on their turn. But again, hanger, really powerful in a deck list like this, giving you the options you need to beat that mirror, have another way to filter out cards that you're not really using. And it can kind of be seen as like a card with blocker. It forces your opponent to attack or use an ability on it, because you can't give the Nami player all this free value. All of a sudden you play hanger, you get rid of an Impel Down All-Stars, and you draw a fresh card. That's not the type of value you want to let the Nami player have turn after turn after turn, because that's free value. That's just good free value, replacing dead cards that are more valuable. Like in a matchup where opponent like Black White Luffy, where they have a lot of 6k swings, maybe you don't want the White Snakes, or against RP Law where they're swinging 6k a lot, playing around the White Snake, then you don't want the White Snake. You get rid of that, draw a fresh card, maybe draw into a Gavel, draw into a Deathwing from a previous list if you're playing Deathwing in a hanger list, draw into a Spada, Mellow, Snake Dance, whatever it might be, drawing into good value. This is a card that kind of takes in that ability that your opponent might have for removal that they might say for a Kaya, but they kind of have to use for the hanger or like a free attack. So again, having that kind of pseudo blocker, kind of drawing an attack. So again, a lot of power in both of these lists. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Is there anything that I missed out of these 2 lists? Is there anything I missed out of the matchup? So one thing I will say, and I should have probably mentioned this in the beginning, and I'll mention it here. I might just add in a short little snippet here, but let me know if you're able to get me in touch with both these players. I would love to get in an interview with David. I have his Twitter, so I did message him there to see if I can get an interview and just kind of talking about this placement here. But especially Rohit, I'm not able to so far get in touch with him. So someone let me know in the comment section down below if they can get me in touch with them. I'd love to do an interview on the first place placement, the first big Nami, the first big win for Nami as an archetype. I'd love to get that conversation going for all of you, just so y'all can have that as content, and especially just kind of getting really into the weeds with OP07 meta, get their knowledge on the RP Law matchup, and just everything in between. Let me know if you're able to get me in touch with them, and I'd love to do that for you. Otherwise, Like, comment, subscribe on the video, hit that bell notification for future Nami content. I'm so excited for where we're going in OP07. OP08 is going to be a little tough, but of course we have the ban and restricted announcement update this month, so let's see what happens out of that. Regardless, we got ourselves a Nami meta.